Good morning and welcome to the Business of Life Sciences. I'm Laura Berarducci, Senior Director of Development and Communications for Ann Arbor Spark. I am delighted to see this room filled with so many innovators, entrepreneurs, and community partners. This is the first year we've added the Business of Life Sciences to the A2 Tech 360 lineup, and we could not be more excited. The life sciences sector has long been one of our region's greatest strengths, from startups tackling everything from medical devices to biotech. Today's program shines a spotlight on those strengths with conversations designed to inspire, inform, and connect. At Spark, our mission is straightforward: to build an economy where innovation thrives and opportunity is shared. We serve Washtenaw County as the regional economic development organization powered by a coalition of private businesses, public partners, and academic institutions. Together, we're creating an ecosystem where companies can grow and ideas can take flight. And our region continues to gain national attention. Just last month, Ann Arbor was ranked among the top 5 Midwest cities for startups, an impressive feat considering the other cities on that list were several times larger than ours. Here's what that recognition means in practice. We lead the Midwest in startup density. We rank second in overall startup activity and momentum, and we are third in the number of patents issued. These kinds of results reflect the strength of our ecosystem, where entrepreneurs, researchers, and innovators and civic leaders work together, turn bold ideas into real impact. It's that culture of collaboration and shared purpose that continues to set our region apart. And what better place to host this inaugural event than my HQ's newest facility. This campus, a work in progress, is being purpose-built for innovators with the kind of specialized space that helps life science companies go from idea to impact. And before we begin, I'd like to thank those who make today possible, our event sponsors, MyHQ, Sartorius, and ONL Therapeutics. Your support helps us bring this vision to life. And A2 Tech 360 as a whole would not be possible without the Local Development Finance Authority, or LDFA. Our host today is no stranger to innovation or to the entrepreneurs who fuel it. Mark Smith is the Chief Imagineer and owner of MyHQ, which is home to dozens of companies across a range of industries. With more than 30 years of experience in real estate and a track record of supporting startups from medical devices to agribusinesses, Mark and his team have transformed MyHQ into a thriving hub for collaboration, growth, and discovery. Please join me in welcoming Mark Smith.
Thank you, Laura. Good morning and welcome. Welcome everyone to MyHQ East for our newest location. It's a privilege to host this inaugural A2 Tech 360 event, the Business of Life Sciences. When we created MyHQ, the vision was simple: to build a community with hard-to-find specialized space where innovators could collide, collaborate, and do their best work. Over the years, we've had the privilege of working with entrepreneurs and researchers who are developing technologies that will change lives, and they are changing lives. Today's program reflects that same spirit. We'll hear from entrepreneurs who navigated the long and challenging path to commercialization, a keynote from our region's leading champions of innovation, and a panel highlighting the many resources available to life science companies in our community. So let's get started. Our first panelist discussion, The Path to Commercialization, brings together a powerhouse group of leaders who have walked through the journey of taking science to market. They'll share lessons learned from regulatory hurdles, funding strategies, and offer practical advice to entrepreneurs at every stage. Please join me in welcoming our panelists: Diane Buis, Acting CEO of Microvascular Health Solutions; Stephanie Morley, CEO of Vetlin; David Esposito, CEO of O&L Therapeutics, and David Cantor, past Executive Director of NCRC and Senior Associate Vice President at the University of Michigan.
Well, thank you for that warm introduction, Mark. We're so delighted to be here. Ann Arbor Spark, the new MIHQ East, IPSI. What a pleasure to be here. And especially what a privilege to have an esteemed group of people to discuss commercialization in life sciences with, spanning devices, therapeutics, and the greater arc of life sciences over time, and really from inception to commercialization. This is 45 minutes. It's obviously way too short to get that done, but we'll try. And first, I want you to have a better idea of the background and who these folks are. So I'm going to ask my panelists to introduce themselves in the order they're sitting next to me before we dive in a little bit. David.
Diane, thank you very much, and it's great to be here. I'm David Esposito, CEO of O&L Therapeutics. Been the CEO for about 5-6 years or so. We're a small biotech in Ann Arbor in phase 2 clinical trials. A little bit over 30 years in life sciences. Started off my career at Merck for about 15, 16 years, mostly in commercial roles throughout the US. And last 15 years have been here in Michigan building early stage life science companies, both on the diagnostic side and the therapeutic side. Had a few good journeys that had positive exits. Had a few that I took over a cliff in bankruptcy or whatever polite term you use, wind down mode. But a pleasure to be here. Look forward to the panel.
My name is Stephanie Morley. I'm CEO of Vetlin. My background, I'm a veterinarian, so I'm a little bit different than, my pathway is going to be a little bit different than a lot of the other conversations. But my background, I practiced early in my career. Then I've done things such as being a lab animal veterinarian in the CRO world, so I know the drug development side from the preclinical world. I've also worked at University of Michigan in the Fast Forward Medical Innovation Group, and then went on and co-founded a company called Zomedica, which is based here in Ann Arbor. That is a animal health company focused on diagnostics primarily. We took that company public, and I left there in 2021. And since then, I have been working with a company called Pergo Scientific, which is based out of Utah, and it is a medical device, a drug delivery device, and I'm running the veterinary division. So Vetlin is a division of a human device company, and we have commercialized that just about a year ago, while the human product is going through the FDA.
Good morning, everyone. My name is David Cantor. I have a medical background from England, worked in the National Health Service for 5 years or so. And then ended up in pharmaceutical R&D doing clinical trials in Northern Europe. I came here, I was working for Parke-Davis. I came here in the mid-1980s because of Parke-Davis had their research headquarters here in Ann Arbor. I was in clinical development in the cardiovascular field, metabolic diseases, and then became a VP of drug development, basically a project leader. And did that through actually through the launch of Lipitor, which was actually the project that I led all the way through the clinical development stages and into the first marketplaces in Europe and the United States. I then went to, Warren Lambert bought a French company, and they had a small research site in Paris. So somebody had to go and head up the site. So I agreed that I would take that. So I went to France for 3 years, heading up a small research site there. And then Pfizer took over Warren Lambert, and I ended up coming back to Ann Arbor as the research site head here in Ann Arbor. And then a couple of years later, all the human health in Kalamazoo. Then when Pfizer left, I joined the university, started at the William Davidson Institute, and then switched to become the executive director of the NCLC, the old Pfizer Parke-Davis site. And I took that job for about 9 years from about 200 people on site. And when I left, there were about 3,000. So that is my experience. And I've taught in the business school. I've taught a class called the Business of Biology for the last 14, 15 years.
And so no one better to talk about the business of biology or commercialization than this panel. I think I'm going to start with you, Stephanie. You drew the arc of human medical device and veterinarian device, and I know that your company is taking a path with a two-pronged path. I would love to have you tell us a little bit more about it and what the regulatory pathway and go-to-market looks like for both of those. I know you're also on the board of the mothership of Pergo, that is the human medical device.
Yeah, so I talk to a lot of companies in life sciences who have products they think have potential in the veterinary market. And most of those companies I talk to, the first question I ask is about cost of goods. You know, how much does your product cost to make? That's going to be the number one hurdle for the veterinary side. We're a cash-based business in veterinary medicine. It's very different economics than in human medicine. From a medical standpoint, we're the same. We want just as great a care for our pets as we do for our people. So, but you have to get through the economics to actually create a business out of it. So for the device side, what's a little bit unique on the veterinary side is there is no pre-market regulatory requirement. So you can go direct to market without going through the FDA. You just have to have truth in claims once you're out there if you don't want to have a visit from the FDA. The benefit for that, for the human side of things, is obviously it's earlier revenue. It's also earlier validation of your product. You have the opportunity to develop new IP while testing it on true patients, if you will. So there's tremendous benefit. There is a cost to generating revenue. So anyone who wants to get into veterinary medicine thinks, well, this is earlier revenue. Well, you got to be ready to invest in it, right? You don't just put it out there and vets are going to buy anything you put out there. You still have to market it and sell it and put some science behind it, right? But that is one reason why Pergo reached out to me, was because I have that history of finding these technologies that are being developed for human medicine and trying to get them into veterinary medicine first. On the drug side, that's not the case. You have to go through the FDA, Center for Veterinary Medicine, for drugs. So there is still a potential for that. And I encourage people who have products that you think have that potential to speak to people on the animal health side and see if there's an opportunity there. But it's not a faster pathway. And it's probably a cheaper pathway, but cheaper is all relative, right? On the diagnostic side, it's even more convoluted because if it's a point of care device, it still needs to be regulated. But if it's being used in a central lab, then it does not require regulatory oversight. So there is opportunity in the veterinary market. And like I said, I would encourage you to look into it, if for no other reason than as a veterinarian, I want to see all these amazing products that people are developing benefiting our animal patients as well. And there are people out there who can assess that technology for you and see if it's an opportunity.
David, David Esposito. I've got to be careful with my Davids here. You're human only, and especially as a therapeutic company, the pathway is very different. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Also can sympathize a little bit with the diagnostics approach too. It's a little bit quicker to market even on the human health side. But on the therapeutic side, you're right. The timelines are a lot longer. The development cycles a lot longer. You know, ultimately, and in David's history, I forgot about the Lipitor history. I grew up as selling statins for Merck, so we always thought we launched it first, but I know Lipitor took over. I had to at least put that out there. Merck did create the market.
Within weeks.
Yeah, all right, we'll continue. But to that point, it is a long journey. I mean, with O&L right now, we're approaching 15 years in the business. Took a good handful of 6-7 years just to really identify the right, not the target, but the actual compound and formulation. We're now into our second phase 2 human trials. And when you get into chronic conditions, these are 2-3 year journeys added up to that. You know, the typical cycle of a phase 1 demonstrating safety, phase 2 safety and efficacy, and then phase 3 is ultimately the registrational trial. So in our world with chronic eye diseases, things like age-related macular degeneration, really long, and the capital is intensive. You know, we've raised upwards of 150, 160 million already, and probably a lot more to get really down to commercialization. And we're in the business of life science, which is super risky at all stages. And you know, on the therapeutic side, even just gaining FDA approval and getting to market doesn't minimize the risk. There's always things that happen when all of a sudden you scale into millions of patients. So the journey is quite different, but the purposeful intent of impacting human health or animal health, and what Stephanie describes, very consistent.
David Cantor, to kind of to continue on that theme of how do you get to market from the early preclinical to then regulatory pathways, you've seen that arc over the decades, plural. So at this point in time, what are some of the changes and challenges you see as our world is changing before our eyes?
I just want to emphasize a couple of things. Firstly, obviously, we're beginning to hear of real differences between the veterinary medicine, veterinary diagnostics, human devices field. And yet, the one thing we have in common with all of this is that we are science-based industries. And if there is an alpha and an omega, I argue this all the time, alpha is science. And if you don't have good science, and I think the story of Tyrannos, everyone must have read, that story, is a vivid example of where the science is ignored. The second thing is that the probabilities of success in the various businesses for human, a drug starting off, typically reported as about 10% from first entry into man to market. Veterinary medicine is much more like 60 or 70%. Diagnostics and devices, much more in the high 80% rate. If it involves engineering, the chances are it can be much higher rate of success. So that is a really important factor. And not only that, unlike the drugs where if you realize that you have slightly the wrong molecule and you want to change it, you have to go back to the beginning. But if you're a device, and the iterative process is very much part of the device world. So from my large company perspective, let me say this. Firstly, the path to commercialization for many small companies is not the marketplace. It's a buyout. It's how can I be as attractive as I can possibly be to a large buyer, to a large company. We keep hearing of big pharma coming back in and starting to want to invest in small companies. But actually, if it's a fad, if it is, because it really makes no sense. For a large company to have any reasonable success and to do multiple deals with small startup companies, firstly, they haven't got the scientists in R&D to do all of the due diligence. They would have so many lawyers, and then you'd end up being a nanny to a whole bunch of small companies. It actually doesn't make any sense. So the logic of waiting and spending $500 million, $1 billion on something that actually has real data, clinical data, that suggests something of value. And that value comment is very real. It has to bring value over and above what exists today. So that actually represents a good use of the cash that Big Pharma has. The one problem Big Pharma has, it has so much cash. It may be in the wrong place, it may be in Ireland, it may be, but that, I know it sounds ridiculous, but a big company like Pfizer probably has $50 or $60 billion in cash somewhere stacked around in banks. And they want to use it. So the pursuit of acquisitions at late phase 2, maybe early phase 3, brings the pharma strength, I think, which is the ability to do large-scale endpoint studies that really demonstrate value, manufacturing, all right, all of the things needed to get to the market.
Let me jump in, Dan, if I could just add to a little bit of that, just in terms of thinking about capitalizing an investment towards whether it's diagnostics or therapeutics. You need, as a small leadership team, really need to keep your options open because the marketplace does change. To David's point, there is a little bit of a change in the dynamic of large pharma and what they're thinking about. So we see it as an opportunity to, hey, I've got to build a base plan. Most likely that's venture funded in our world, start seed, Series A, go from angel right to venture. do that. But at each value inflection point that you're creating with that capital, it's important to keep options open because the cost of capital might be better in the private markets. It might be better in the public markets. And to the comment David made on strategics, large pharma players, we're in a market that became very hot all of a sudden when the FDA approved the first ever 2 therapeutics in this condition, dry age-related macular degeneration. So that gets every big pharma company in the eye space thinking about what's going on there. And we ended up having J&J lead a Series D round most recently. And I think you got to keep your eyes open to where the market's going. We build a base case that we're going to fund this thing for the journey to get to commercialization. But the practical side is both either the excitement of our own data or the changes in the external market may bring different players around the table. And I think at the end of the day, whether it's a strategic deal or a VC fund, you just got to move the program forward and you figure out how best to do that.
Can I jump in too? Yeah, another point driving off of what you said about value. I think it's easy to lose sight of what your value is in a life science startup because your roadmap is so long. But your value is your patients, and don't forget the physicians treating them. So when we launched Zomedica, we didn't have products yet. We were a company that was built off of nothing yet, and we had to build a pipeline. But the main thing we did was a voice of customer community. So we created a group of what we called Voice of the Vet, but it was essentially come be part of the conversation about what products are going to be valuable to you and how you'd like us to develop these for you, right? I didn't realize we had kind of really tapped into something really beneficial until it started growing and people are actually joining it. I mean, they weren't getting anything out of it, right? But the more veterinarians I talk to, and I've talked to physicians in the same way, they don't see themselves as a customer. They think their patients are the customer. But guess what? Those patients aren't going to get those treatments until the doctor recommends them, right? So every step along the way, make sure you're touching base with those physicians and those clinicians who are actually going to be the one prescribing or using the products you're developing. I can't emphasize that enough. If you lose sight of that, it doesn't matter what endpoint you get to, you won't fulfill what you're here to accomplish, which is to make life better for human and animal kind, right? The other thing I would say is that to keep yourself open to like David said, I'm surrounded by Davids. I know. That's good for me. I'm horrible with names. But yeah, keep yourself surrounded by people who help you see the opportunity. It is so important to be able to pivot in startups. I can't even tell you, you get whiplash, and that's just part of the deal, but you get addicted to it and you're ready for the next opportunity. But keep your eyes open to it and surround yourself with people who are able to open doors for you and say, hey, just think about this. Let's just throw this one up on the wall and see if it sticks. Because you never know what could happen. And quite honestly, that's how I've built a career is, right? Yep, tell me about your product. Oh, yes, that belongs at VetMed. Let's talk about what that could look like, right? So just stay open to those things.
May I just add a little bit more? So one of the big trends that's occurred in the last 6-7 years is that the percentage of drugs, new drugs approved by the FDA that are orphan indication has now got to the point of it being about 55, maybe close to 60% some years. That is a radical, radical change from, say, 15 years ago. Completely radical. The prices that are being charged for these drugs are completely opaque, but one can guess that they're probably 15 times the overall average price, the average cost. They are very expensive drugs. So, but that is driven by the value proposition. Some of these drugs are really very effective and have got data that supports the value proposition. So I think that's an interesting trend. The other is that biologics, everyone says, oh, biologics, they're the only game in town. Yeah, sort of. They're attractive because they have much more longer protection in the commercial market, not just patent, it's the same, but for exclusivity, protection in the United States. They are much longer than small molecules. But just observe what's going on with the GLP drugs. What is the key that everyone's talking about? It's the fact that Eli Lilly is developing an oral, small molecule equivalent of it. And their belief is that that would be a game changer. So don't blow off small molecules. They're still considered to be incredibly valuable. Obviously, they can pivot off what biologics have done in terms of support of the data. But again, I'm always wary of people who make sweeping statements. And, oh, it's all about biologics. It's too sweeping. It's not.
It's all about a lot of things. And one of the things that we haven't talked about, and that I wanted to push back a little on an earlier statement that you made, David Cantor, is that pharma sits on a lot of money, completely agreed, but is investing sparsely in startups. I think we're seeing a lot of investment in digital health. And and on this panel, I might be the best digital health person. And so we're seeing a ton of digital health emerge everywhere. And so I at least wanted to put a finger on that one. I think we've got a little bit of digital health in the room as well. That is an area that can, of course, grow faster because there are no physical assets, right? When you have a drug or you have a device, your path to market is longer. So I wanted to pinpoint that one. But then I think you all touched on fundraising and you all touched on strategic partnerships. And so I wanted to stay on how do you find the people who help you grow? And what I mean by people first, and then we can go into company internal dynamics, but strategic partnerships that are not just investment, but that are channel partners, that are potentially manufacturing partners. So your investment dollar goes farther if you can share it with someone. And so I'd love all three of you to weigh in your own way on how you find the commercial partners to grow your company with. Maybe I'll start with Stephanie. You're sitting in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, I think for strategic partners, so being a very early stage startup, right? Because I did all the transfer to manufacturing for the human company. So we went through all those pitfalls and then launched the product that they are still going through the FDA on. Finding manufacturer, for example, looking for manufacturers who specifically work with my stage company, right? Somebody who knows that we have to be able to iterate. You have to have strong engineers on your team, et cetera. And in my case, somebody who's comfortable working in the animal health sector as well as the human sector. We're actually based out of University of Utah. We're a spin out from U of U. And so our product is made in Salt Lake City. The other thing is don't be afraid to talk to people early on about their interest in taking equity as a form of their compensation. If you're working with people who are accustomed to working with a stage of company, then they're open to ideas like that. And they understand your cash flow constraints. So don't be afraid to do that. For strategic partners, for actually developing products for maybe potential new indications or to prove out new indications before maybe you take that to market. At least in my world, what I do is pay attention to the pipelines of the major animal health companies. So if I know what it is they're developing, I can look for really strategic ways where my device could fit into that pipeline and potentially provide a unique opportunity for them in the marketplace. So it's, again, talking about value and those opportunities is keep an eye on your competitive landscape and don't look at them as competitors and look at them as strategic partners and say, where could we fit in? Where could we be holding hands on something? And you're going to find some unique opportunities there. And then network, because somebody knows somebody everywhere around you. So don't be afraid to reach out to those people and say, hey, I see you're connected to somebody at this business. Could you connect me? Going to things like this, et cetera. It's just hugely invaluable.
David's?
Yeah, let me just add to that last comment. I do think a great connection is to identify the early researchers in large companies and go talk to them. Find a conference, find an excuse to go talk to them. And often that is the toehold into a large company because their researchers will go to their licensing people and say, you know what, I think you need to go talk to these people. And they'll be listened to much more from being an internal message than it will be for you. It's just assume you're hyping everything. They will come back and say, I think there's something here. So I absolutely agree. That's part of networking is go talk to the researchers that you find in conferences. Be at the conference, go talk to these people.
I just may add to that too, it is important to reach broadly, even when you think a particular potential partner group is not interested in an equity investment, a cash investment or something, because a lot of the bigger players change directions sometimes, and it's not like they make some big public statements about them. Many of them go into seed stage financing sometimes, and couldn't overestimate the need to make sure we kind of broadly outreach. I would just say, you mentioned digital health too. So I think in these kind of partnerships, whether it's building equipment, the med tech business for a while, and diagnostics, and then obviously therapeutics, it's really important in the fine tuning of those agreements to really understand what the intellectual property rights in are, especially in the digital health space with aspects of machine learning and algorithms. It can really create a pretty complex web of who owns what when ultimately you get a strategic really interested in a piece of business. And so it is important to reach out. They're all levers to move the technology forward, but you just want to meter really slow and on methodical with some really good legal advice that understands the complexities on patent work.
Thanks for pointing that out. One of the things, of course, we're a panel in Washtenaw County. We're in Michigan. Michigan has a long history of manufacturing, so I recognize that not everything gets manufactured here. But and I think Stephanie already touched a little bit on finding the right manufacturing partners. But I'd like. Perhaps David Cantor, just because you've been here the longest. How do you look? How do you look at manufacturing partnerships? How do you identify really who to work with, and how do you vet them?
Obviously, manufacturing is not my field, but we've had a few sort of iterations over the last 40 years around manufacturing. So there's one level that's political. So Puerto Rico at one point was, powerfully incentivized by the U.S. government to be a manufacturing source for pharmaceuticals. Interesting, and on the radio, I'm listening to a Puerto Rico ad yesterday saying, oh, by the way, Puerto Rico, if you import drugs from Puerto Rico, it's inside the United States. There are no tariffs. All right? And so they're coming back and saying, we actually have the expertise. We have manufacturing sites there. Come talk to us. The other thing was obviously another big driver was the various taxes on corporations that were very high in the United States that drove manufacturing to Singapore, to Ireland, to where the corporation taxes were much, much lower. And so Ireland, it's 12%. Here now it's 22.5%, I think, something like that. But you've got to understand that manufacturing, in some cases, that your choices, if you're a small company, you're not going to be manufacturing it yourself. You're going to be contracting to whoever it is. And that contract site may be in the United States. Certainly, if it's a biologic, it might be. But if it's a small molecule, there's a good chance it'll be in India or China or Europe or others. And the amount of drug you need may be really not, would never justify having two manufacturing sites and all the effort to bring it through GMP accreditation. So I think sometimes you have to be knowledgeable and practical about the political situation. And in other times you have to be knowledgeable and practical about reality. Who can make this stuff at a quantity and a price that you can afford? And maybe the tariff is a tough one. It's going to be, certainly for a company like Pfizer, in many ways you have to understand that Pfizer Ireland is a separate legal entity from Pfizer US. So Pfizer Ireland sells the drug to Pfizer US at a certain price, takes the profit, big profit margin in Ireland. So that's where the cash is. Well, if the tariff is, someone's going to do the math and work out that if you drop the price, the tariff won't be so high. And you'll pay an extra percentage of the corporation tax here in the United States, and someone will do it and say we're better off. So there's going to be a lot of games played, a lot of games. But manufacturing, I think, for small companies, I don't know. I sense for a device, it's about where can you get the quality. Knowing that quality in devices is just such a driver. For small molecules, it's going to be different from large molecules.
Let me just add something, just a couple things, especially for early stage, whether it's therapeutic device or diagnostics. It's you got to do the homework to vet the partners that you want across the globe, whatever you want it. At the end of the day, it never goes as smoothly as you like it would. It just never, something comes off the rails every single time with every kind of partner you have. It's just part of the journey we're all on. And so I think it's just important to understand that and do your best job in vetting partners. I would.
What does that look like? Talk to me about the homework.
Oh boy. Okay, all right. I'll start our real journey with O&L Therapeutics. David mentioned a little bit on manufacturing in China. We have now 2 suppliers of our API, our actual chemical entity, and also our drug product. And scaling up manufacturing, although it sounds like simple, you just make a little bit bigger batch, stir it for a little bit longer, let it sit for a while. It doesn't go that way, so we typically now, we're just getting ready to open up our trial. We're 9+ months delayed because we had to figure out how long to stir, sit, watch it, and do all those kind of things. And the partners we aligned with took a little bit longer to help us learn that journey. And you mentioned GLP-1s a couple times. In drug manufacturing, a lot of the traditional places you'd go to manufacture, they're all backed up because everybody's trying to do overruns to GLP-1s and all those things. So all that impacts it. So I think it's just, that's a little bit of the work that you just got somewhat put above and beyond the base case to get ready. The only other thing I'd say is, because you mentioned a little bit on taxes, we did all of our initial phase 1 trials in Australia. Australia has a really, just like here in Ann Arbor, Spark supporting local communities, my HQ right here to support things. Australia's tax incentive, it's 43.5% back on every dollar you spend in R&D. So for an early stage company, regardless of therapeutic or diagnostics, it makes for a really nice deal. It helped our runway go a lot longer. Creates a little headaches. You're halfway around the world. Everybody's having calls at midnight and all that stuff. But in some ways, it helps stretch some things out. But again, you vet enough, and ultimately something comes off the rails, and you got to regroup.
I mean, as far as your how do you vet, talk to people that have worked with them. Go find other people that they've manufactured product for and talk to them. And particularly companies who are maybe at the same stage you're at or the next stage, so you can see that they've been successful or not. And the other thing, at least on all sides, but definitely devices and diagnostics, your manufactured product is one thing, your raw materials are another. So don't ever stop thinking about all the components that go into whatever it is you're making, because anything in that supply chain we also, similar story, had a delay because of one raw material, just one piece, one component. But that did slow us down by a good 6 months. But yeah, talking to other people is just as simple as that, and looking for examples. And then, never stop project managing your partners, right? Your vendors. My current company, we're 3 people. So we rely heavily on partnerships. And I've made the mistake before in the past where I trusted too much too soon. And now I don't make that mistake anymore. I'm still like to think I'm a pretty good partner, but I ask questions. I stay on top of them. I demand updates. I demand, root cause analysis when we have a quality issue. This isn't just I need to see it on rating, how you tested this, et cetera, et cetera. Just because they have a business to run too, but their business is to be successful for you. So don't ever hesitate to make sure that they're giving you what you need.
The last topic that I wanted to touch on with you is company growth, just because that's, in many ways, that's what we all aspire to, that we want to grow our companies, we want to grow the ecosystem. But in order to grow the company, you need the external partners, we talked about those, and you need to find good people. And with that, growth also is navigating challenges. And so I would love your reflections on how and where to find the good people, and or how to navigate really uncertain times like we are doing now. I'm going to leave it up to you, whoever wants to jump in first.
That's like an hour-long conversation.
It sure is, but we don't have an hour.
Okay. I'll give my 2 cents on it. I think culture, it doesn't matter the size of your company. The culture can kill a company. So I've worked in, being a team of 3 all the way up to leading teams of 800 people. And so don't lose sight of that. If you're running the company, you set the culture, period. It always starts at the top. So be intentional with how you want to do that and don't lose sight of it. When you're hiring people, not everybody belongs in a startup, period. And not everybody belongs in a big company, period. I couldn't go back to a big company if I tried. Some days I don't know why I do the startup thing either, but when you're hiring, some people are comfortable in different aspects and different sizes of company and different stages of company, and that's okay. But you have to know when someone's not the right fit anymore. And making tough decisions as the boss is your job, and your whole company will be better for it when you make those tough decisions. So when you're interviewing people, if they don't have startup experience, doesn't mean they don't belong in a startup, but you got to ask the questions about their comfort with pivoting, ambiguity, short runways of cash, job insecurity, and genuine enthusiasm for what you're doing, because enthusiasm sometimes is the only capital you have around the office, right? So asking those questions is really what's going to set you up. Also, don't be afraid to contract people. Don't hire FTEs until you really need to. It's a good way to test people. I've hired many people on after they've been contract with me. And yes, it worked and great, awesome, come on full time because now I can justify an FTE. And I've also hired contract people where they weren't going to be a good fit and I was really glad I didn't hire them, right? I could go on for an hour, but I'm not going to because I know you have thoughts too.
I'll pile on the consultant or contractor route. I think that's a really helpful way to scale businesses in life sciences because the risks are going to be out there, and it's risk on bringing somebody on full time, but risk in the technology doesn't work out, and sometimes it's a little bit easier to unwind things. So I just think that's a really important part, and also it gives the potential employee a little bit of kind of runway and trial and error as well, which is really good. And then I think the one ripple that's occurred for all of us, I think, over the last 5 or 6 years with COVID is just managing this kind of hybrid virtual world. You need some expertise here. I don't care where it is in the globe. We're going to kind of dial them in. But at the end of the day, I found that culture building or that really intense problem solving, get around a whiteboard and just hammer out a problem, gets a click or two slower when everybody's virtual. So, we drag everybody. We have about half and half on our team, and we do bring everybody in on a routine basis. So I think some of those things for culture is important, but real intense problem solving, we in a number of companies just struggled with the click off of a Zoom call where you just left something hanging. So that's a part of the culture that's tough in scaling in our world now, where you do have a bit of a hybrid world.
So obviously I have a big pharma background, but actually big pharma can grow too fast. And there is a definite optimum size of a big pharma company. I watched Pfizer acquire Warner Lambert and then Pharmacia and then American Home Products, and it just went on and on. And they didn't deal with the reality of having too many research sites until they suddenly realized they had too many research sites and it was just too big an organization. So what I will say is that one thing that may well happen to you as a small company is you'll be acquired by a big company. And they open a book. It's a standard book of phrases and things to say. And it always starts off by, the first thing is that the CEO and the leadership of the company will take full credit on day one for a successful merger or an acquisition. And that will be the last time that you ever see them, really. The second thing is that they will always say, the following sentence, we will retain the new company in its form to retain its nimbleness and its scientific acumen as a small company. Yep, that lasts a short time, at which point they will be brought into the fold, and all of the people who were there will find themselves working for a big company, and they didn't want to work for a big company. So I think you really have to accept that once you've sold your company to a big company, you may have an obligation to stay for a year or two, But it's tough. It really is tough. The big company wants to fit it in to their systems. They want to fit it in to how they go about doing their business. And so just don't get upset in the end that you basically leave. And you've done your business, and your investors are very happy. They got a check, and that's the best form of exit one can get, really, rather than shares or something else. So I think you've done it. And the hardest thing I watched were founders who deeply believed in their product, and they wanted to see it win patients deeply. That was an incredible motivation for them. That was why they founded the company. That's why they put all of the effort into it. And of course, it's sort of been removed from them. And it's very, very hard. And I just watched it and I acknowledged it. And I just saw one company after another, be it Merck, BMS, Glaxo, I mean, all of these companies, they seem to all do the same thing. I think J&J might be the only model that keeps multiple small companies that they've acquired with a CEO at the head of each of them. That might be the only model that I know.
So I want to make sure that on a short panel, we cannot cover everything, but there's so many things one could potentially talk about on the path to commercialization. So I wanted to just open it to the three of you and say, is there advice you have for this room? This is a room of smart and motivated people in the life sciences who are going through the motions of commercialization in various ways. Any advice that we haven't touched upon that you would like to give them?
I'll jump in maybe on a few. I mean, at the end of the day, we may talk about successes or failures or moving the science forward, however you want to describe it. Like, it's real purposeful work, right? We're all in here to really make a difference in human life, animal health. It's purposeful work. It's really important to remember that. But then also, as you move through development to then commercialization, it's also been a constant source of, I'll say, a bit of healthy tension or intense debate, that you never have all the data you want. You never have all the answers to everything. You got to get to the next milestone, and you just got to figure out, is it good enough to move to the next level? And that's a constant struggle I've had on every one of the teams I've been working on, because you have some that, it's a scientific background. The classic scientific rubric is do another experiment to answer another question. But then you got a cash runway and you got an investor saying, you're going to get to market quick. Why aren't you doing? And so that it's just a good source of really good debate. But that we all just got to feel comfortable that we don't have all the answers, but is it good enough to keep moving it forward and just, get some courage and move it forward?
I think my strongest piece of advice would be to surround yourself with good people, particularly in life sciences, because there's a lot of people who are more science heavy and less business heavy and vice versa. And you need both. I would also encourage you, if you are a scientist, you understand business more than you realize. You really do. Lean into that. And if you are a business person and you don't know a lot about science, start surrounding yourself by really strong scientists who are good collaborators, because we need that partnership between those two things. But as someone who lives in science and business and vice versa, I don't know everything. I don't want to know everything, because that wouldn't be any fun. But I don't know everything, and I surround myself with people who are really strong, really smart, and have great integrity and really believe in what we're doing and help me make the best decisions I can make. So reach into your network, ask to be introduced to people who maybe have similar backgrounds in what you're doing. Really lean in those people. And just as much as we said, stay open to other potential avenues for commercialization of your product or funding for your product. Stay open to relationships that you may not see how that person could help you now, but I can guarantee at some point that person could come back and help you. You won't regret that.
One of the things that I grew up with in the drug development business was something which scientists absolutely hate, which is very early on, you demanded that they actually draft a package insert based on a future of what it would look like were you to be really successful. And the scientists absolutely hate it because it's fantasizing on data that doesn't exist. And you're smashing their face, and you have to get them somehow to fling themselves into the future and say, you launched this drug, what was the package insert that produced a $500 or $1 billion drug in the first year? And sometimes they can do that, and then they write out the package insert, and then you pose the question, all right, what did you put in that package insert that was the definitive value proposition? And sometimes it's not manufacturing. Believe me, manufacturing can fail you, but if you're a very good manufacturer, it's just assumed that that's part of the business. If you have a co-diagnostic, it's just assumed that that was necessary. That isn't the key. But if you turn it around, you end up often finding we did a very key clinical study where we decided to do a morbidity study prior to approval. And it cost $100 million. All right? But that turned it from a ho-hum, possibly different, to being something that was quite different, quite radical. Now, if you say, I don't have $100 million, then you realize the only way to get $100 million is to partner, okay? But the idea that you can do little studies that are underpowered, that aren't the real endpoints, that are just surrogates, that people don't take seriously, you suddenly realize you're avoiding the real question, which is what changes it from something that is of equal value to what's out there to something that gets people going, this is different. And so a package insert exercise, I promise you, it is incredibly painful. The business people like it, the scientists hate it. Just because it just runs against everything they've been taught. So I think that's a key part of success is actually envisaging what do you really need.
So with that, I feel it's very hard to summarize a panel. So I'm not promising to summarize it all, but really. For those who paid attention, and it looks like we still have your attention, which is great. We start with the science, right? Start with the science, but the science is not the be-all, end-all. Partner, network, find sometimes the scientists, sometimes the business people. Find the people who may be relevant to your business in the future, sometimes at conferences, sometimes just by observing other people's pipelines, right? So find the people. Remain nimble. See opportunities where they are, and launch yourself into uncertainty. I think if those were my main takeaways. I'm sure there were many others. I want to thank this panel. I didn't even need to be here. They could have had this conversation by themselves. Thank you for joining me here today, and thank you, audience, for joining us today.